Businesses are struggling during this economic crisis. And as you're going to see in a moment, barter is both a natural outcome of that and a cure. But what we're seeing is that production capacities are decreasing and the current stock is not selling right now. And that's causing liquidity problems for local companies. Also, we know the banks are untrustworthy, and at every turn on this perilous journey, there's a government highway robber sitting there waiting to relieve you of your money, your job, or your business. But as we discussed in the Great Depression Deja Vu, our last video, none of this is new. We've seen this all before. And the good news is that there is an unexpected hero in this story, and it's called the barter economy. Welcome back to Renegade News. I'm your host, Glenn Kowalski. Every week on this channel, we discuss the latest news, strategies, and tactics for breaking free from the system, paying less tax, and living anywhere in the world that you want. So let's get straight into it. Throughout history, barter has been a very important tool to help people feed their families and ensure the survival of their businesses during economic downturns. For example, in Mesopotamia, the tribes were likely the starting point of the bartering system, and that went back to as far as 6000 BC. And there, they used the bartering system to get their food, their weapons, and all of the spices that they needed. Roman soldiers even bartered their services for the empire in exchange for payment in salt. There are also several passages in the Bible that mention people trading for things like livestock in exchange for food or other services. For example, Genesis 47:17. So they brought their livestock to Joseph, and Joseph gave them food in exchange for the horses and the flocks and the herds and the donkeys, and he fed them with food in exchange for all of their livestock that year. But barter, thankfully, didn't end in ancient times. During the Great Depression, the agricultural economy got so bad that many farmers were forced to trade their crops and other goods to their creditors as a form of debt repayment. Many people were laid off, causing them to barter their services directly with one another rather than going through the intermediate step of converting their goods and service into a cash value. Now, if you don't want to go back as far as the 1930s, for a lot of you, that seems like a long time ago. And you might start to think that, well, something like that could never happen in today's society. It already has. In 1985, the Wall Street Journal reported that the rate of price increases in Bolivia over a 6-month period was almost 38,000%. So to put that in perspective, just imagine that you went to a vending machine to buy a soda in January and you paid $1 for that soda. Now, when you went back to that vending machine in June to buy that same can of soda in this hyperinflationary environment, you were paying $381 for that same soda. So in this type of environment, people start to revert from trading in money to trading in actual real goods and services. So that is, they're bartering in order to avoid carrying around money that's going to rapidly lose value. We've all heard about it, people pushing around wheelbarrows of money. There's several examples of that. And barter eliminates that problem. The 2008 economic crisis in the US was the most recent example of bartering really gaining momentum. The World Trade Organization has reported that 15% of the international trade, which was worth $5.62 trillion, was done in the form of barter back in 2018. And it also reported that Asia and Australia and Europe are growing markets for bartering. In 2020, the barter trade became popular again as a way of getting hold of items such as flour, yeast, and eggs, and even toilet paper rolls that were in high demand at the start of the recent health situation. And after many people started panic buying and leaving the shelves empty. But for some, the swapping of goods has continued since those frantic few weeks. So how does this barter system work? Well, as a kid, if you ever swapped one of your toys with a friend in return for one of their toys, you have bartered. Bartering is simply the trading of services or goods with another person where there's no money involved in that trade. And there's many pros to this type of system. It's really easy, and bartering's made a comeback because it's able to use techniques and more sophisticated ways of doing business because of technology. For example, the internet has made it so much easier. There's also different programs that allow you to barter services in a much simpler fashion than you were in the past. Also, bartering is global. So in ancient times, the system involved people in the same area, and the same with when it was done during the farming times. You would go to your neighbor, you trade an apple for a bag of eggs, whatever that happens to be. But today, that bartering industry has gone global. It's also value-based, and that's what's really important about it, because the value of bartering items can be negotiated with the other party. You can buy items by exchanging an item that you have but you no longer want or need. Also, no money is necessary in this transaction. The bartering doesn't involve the money, and that's one of the biggest advantages because it allows you to get away from that rapidly deflating dollar. Barter offers companies a ton of different benefits, such as moving overstock, utilizing idle capacity, increasing sales, finding new markets, supplying interest-free credit. They can also use it to conserve cash. They can do debt configuration, and they can do foreign trade using these techniques. Now, like anything else, there are a few downsides and a few cons to using the barter system. For example, there is this complication in determining how trustworthy the person that you're trading with is. So the other person does not really have to provide any proof or any type of certification that they're legitimate. And there's no consumer protection for these types of trades, and there's no warranties involved. So that means that the services and the goods that you're exchanging may be exchanged for something that's poor or defective, and there's going to be no way of knowing until those services or goods are delivered. The other real con is that because this is working outside of a centralized government, there's already this push for institutionalizing the barter industry, which gets rid of a lot of the pros because now all of a sudden it's going to be centralized in controls. Now, the proponents want these legal regulations for the effective, safe, and widespread application of this barter. In other words, they're doing it for your safety. The problem is once we get the centralized control over everything, you know that stuff falls apart. So even though they're going to sell that centralized control of it as a pro, it really is going to end up being a con, and we're going to end up losing the free market value of the barter provides if they step in and try and control it. Fortunately, it's going to be impossible to control completely. And what's going to happen now is if our economy continues to go into recession, whether it's due to the recent health situation or the climate situation or the war, whatever causes it, whatever excuse they use, what's going to happen is the economy continues to fall down into this recession. Bartering is again going to become an essential tool. And it's going to start to help businesses again survive and allow people to feed their families. So as the economy crumbles and as we go into this recession, as things appear more difficult, don't lose hope. Start bartering, start working with your neighbor, start discussing things with your neighbor. Can you do car work in exchange for work on your house? Can you exchange garden items? Maybe you have a crop that your neighbor doesn't have. Get these bartering relationships started now before we're in the crisis situation, because then you're going to be in a much more better position when that crisis starts to unfold, which we know we're heading into. And what's going to happen as we move forward in these poor economic times is creating this what I like to call a parallel economy. It's going to become more and more critical as that economy slips further and further. Now, fortunately, besides bartering, there are other strategies that you can use to make it through this recession and come out the other side much stronger. And that's why you should subscribe to Renegade News right now, where every week we discuss things like business growth, cryptocurrency, breaking free from the system, and other topics so that we can survive and thrive in any economy. And also check out the video you see on the screen right now for the latest tips and strategies for growing your business and for creating more freedom in this unfree world. I'm Glenn Kowalski from Renegade News, and I'll see you over there.